What would you do if someone was poisoning your family and the law wouldn't help? When Marcus King discovered his mother was being slowly poisoned, he didn't just get mad. He got even. But how far would you go to expose the truth and fight back against those in power? Watch as Marcus takes on the HOA and the Thompsons in a battle that will change his life forever. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Marcus King, a 30-year-old black man, sat on the worn-out couch in the modest living room of their home on East Side, Chicago. The neighborhood was a mix of old charm and urban struggles, and it had been the only home Marcus had ever known. Beside him, his mother, Margaret King, sat in her favorite chair, wrapped in a knitted blanket. At 60, Margaret had always been a vibrant woman, full of life and laughter. But now, her once bright spirit was fading, and it was clear something was wrong. Her liver disease had worsened over the past year, and no doctor had been able to give them a clear answer on why her condition was deteriorating so rapidly. Every day, Marcus watched helplessly as his mother grew weaker. The mounting medical bills only added to their struggles. Marcus had always been the protector, the one who would fix things and make everything right. But now he found himself fighting battles on all fronts, caring for his mother, working long hours as a teacher at the local school, and trying to keep up with the bills that seemed to never stop piling up. Just as Marcus adjusted the oxygen mask on his mother's face, he heard a familiar sound, the screech of tires on the gravel driveway. He sighed and looked up. Karen Thompson, the HOA president, had arrived again. Karen's voice cut through the silence as she rolled down her SUV window, her tone condescending. "Marcus, we've spoken about this before. Those garden gnomes in your yard violate Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our community guidelines. They have to go." Marcus' stomach tightened. Another issue, another battle to face. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow as Marcus stepped into the garden to water the plants, the familiar scent of roses filling the air. His mother, Margaret, had always found peace in this garden, spending hours tending to the flowers that now bloomed in vibrant reds and yellows. The small garden gnomes scattered throughout the yard had been a family tradition, each one carefully chosen by Margaret to represent a happy memory with her late husband. To Marcus, they were more than decorations. They were symbols of love and family. As he watered the flowers, Marcus heard the gravel crunch under the wheels of an SUV. His stomach sank. It was Karen Thompson, the president of their HOA, rolling up in her shiny black vehicle. Karen was notorious for her unannounced visits, always ready to enforce some new regulation or rule. As soon as she stopped, her voice cut through the air. "Marcus, those garden gnomes have to go. They violate Section 8, Paragraph 12 of the community guidelines. You've had enough time," Karen said, her tone as sharp as ever. Marcus tensed, stepping protectively in front of the gnomes. "Karen, these gnomes have been here for years. My mom put them up after Dad passed. They stay." Karen's smile faltered, but she didn't relent. "You'll be fined if you don't remove them, and I'll be watching." With a dismissive wave, Karen pulled away, leaving Marcus standing in the garden, frustrated. The gnomes weren't the only thing weighing on his mind. His mother's health had been rapidly declining over the past few months. She had become more tired, more forgetful, and increasingly weak. Despite numerous doctors' visits, no one could pinpoint the cause. Later that evening, Marcus found his mother hunched over in the bathroom, her face pale and her hands shaking as she struggled to keep down the meal she'd forced herself to eat. "Marcus, I don't feel right," she whispered weakly, holding her stomach. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, his heart sinking. The doctor's diagnosis was inconclusive. They suggested it might be a virus, or possibly something environmental. They'd run some tests, but it didn't explain the rapid deterioration of her health. The following day, as Marcus took out the trash, he noticed Doug Thompson, Karen's husband, standing near the water meter on their property. Doug seemed out of place, glancing around nervously before quickly walking away when he saw Marcus. His behavior seemed odd, like he was trying to avoid being seen. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay, Doug?" "Just walking the dog," Doug mumbled, though Marcus didn't see any sign of a dog anywhere. It struck Marcus as odd, but he let it go. Later that evening, he mentioned it to Elaine Rodriguez, their neighbor across the street. "Doug's been acting strange lately," Marcus said, his suspicion growing. Elaine leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The Thompsons have been targeting anyone who voted against Karen in the last HOA election. And your mom was the only one who stood up against Karen's plan to raise the dues. It's been getting worse for a while now." That conversation made Marcus' blood run cold. Could Karen and Doug be behind his mother's illness? Was there a chance they were poisoning her to get them out of the neighborhood? He didn't know, but one thing was clear. He had to find out the truth. The tension in Marcus' home was palpable, a quiet but oppressive weight that seemed to grow heavier each day. Margaret's condition had become more dire, and it felt like no one could give him a concrete answer. Her health had deteriorated at an alarming rate: nausea, constant fatigue, and a yellowing of her skin that grew worse by the day. Doctors had been unable to pinpoint what was happening to her. All they could offer were vague suggestions, and nothing seemed to help. Marcus, frustrated and desperate, couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was going on. Every time Karen Thompson visited, Margaret's health seemed to take a downturn. The HOA president was relentless in her demands, finding new reasons to criticize every little detail of their home. It wasn't just the fines or the petty rules. There was something about Karen's attitude that made Marcus uneasy. And with Doug's strange behavior around their water meter, Marcus' suspicions were growing. One evening, as Marcus took out the trash, he noticed something strange near the water meter at the edge of their property. The ground around it was disturbed, and as he got closer, he saw small blue droplets staining the rocks nearby. His heart skipped a beat. He recognized the color: ethylene glycol, commonly known as antifreeze. He didn't know for sure, but the sight of the strange liquid made his blood run cold. Could Doug Thompson have been tampering with their water supply? Was it possible they were poisoning his mother? That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He spent hours poring over the footage from his phone, trying to make sense of everything. He had seen Doug near the water meter before, but it had always seemed like a coincidence. Now, it felt like more than that. Doug had been acting strangely, and there were enough signs pointing to him being involved. Marcus knew he needed more than just suspicion. He needed proof. The next day, Marcus rushed to the local hardware store and bought a security camera. He set it up in their oak tree, positioning it directly over the water meter. If Doug came back, Marcus would have the evidence he needed to confront him. His heart pounded in his chest as he tightened the last screw. There was no turning back now. The camera stayed silent for the next 2 days, but Marcus couldn't stop checking the footage, his anxiety building with every passing hour. Then, late on the second night, the camera captured something unmistakable. Doug Thompson, creeping out in the dead of night, bottle in hand, approached the water meter. He looked around nervously before unscrewing the cap and pouring something into the water line. Marcus' heart sank as he watched the footage. There was no doubt about it now. Doug was poisoning their water. Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed a water sample from the kitchen tap and drove straight to the local lab. The technician, an older man with glasses, took the sample from him with a raised eyebrow. "You think someone's poisoning you?" the technician asked, eyeing Marcus with suspicion. "I'm not sure, but I need to know what's in this water," Marcus replied, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "My mother is seriously ill, and I have to know if this is connected." The technician nodded. "I'll run a quick screen for common contaminants, but it'll take a couple of days to get the full results." Marcus left the lab, his thoughts racing. As he drove home, he couldn't shake the image of Doug standing near the water meter, pouring that liquid into the pipes. The police wouldn't take him seriously without more evidence, but he knew he had to do something. Time was running out for his mother, and every minute counted. That evening, another violation notice arrived from the HOA, demanding the removal of the security cameras. Karen's harassment had escalated, and it was clear that she was aware Marcus had been recording. The HOA wasn't just trying to enforce petty rules anymore, they were coming after him directly. The notice was threatening, but it only fueled Marcus' determination. If Karen and Doug thought they could intimidate him into backing down, they were wrong. With the lab results still pending, Marcus made his move. He took the footage and the water sample to the police station, hoping that this time they would take him seriously. When he showed Officer Martinez the video and explained the situation, the officer appeared unimpressed. "This footage shows Doug near the water meter, but it doesn't conclusively show that he's poisoning you," Officer Martinez said. "And the levels of the chemical are low. It's not enough for an arrest." Marcus felt his frustration boil over. "You don't understand. My mom is dying. The timing, the symptoms, it all matches. They're poisoning us, and you're telling me it's not enough to investigate." The officer's expression softened, but she remained firm. "We'll look into it, but without more concrete evidence, there's not much we can do." Marcus left the station feeling more helpless than ever. He had the proof, but no one was willing to act on it. His resolve hardened. If the police weren't going to do anything, he would have to take matters into his own hands. Back home, the violation notices kept coming, each one more outrageous than the last. Karen was pushing harder now, trying to intimidate him into giving up, but Marcus was done playing by their rules. His mother's life was on the line, and he wasn't going to let Karen and Doug get away with it. With each passing day, Marcus felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. His next steps were clear. He would fight back with everything he had, and no matter what it took, he was going to make sure Karen and Doug were held accountable for what they had done. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. His mother's condition had worsened, and the doctors remained unable to explain her rapid decline. It felt like no matter what he did, the situation only grew more dire. Karen's constant harassment from the HOA was the last straw. Each new violation notice felt like another reminder of how helpless they were, but Marcus refused to give in. He had to find a way to fight back, something bigger than just responding to fines or complaints. He needed leverage. Then, as he was scanning the local news on his laptop, a headline caught his eye. Clearwater LLC files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, struggling to stay afloat. Clearwater LLC was the company that provided water to Pine Crest Gardens, including their neighborhood. The article revealed that the company was in serious financial trouble and looking to sell off its assets, including the water rights for various communities. For Marcus, it was like a light bulb had gone off. This could be the opportunity he had been waiting for. He quickly realized that if he could buy Clearwater LLC, he would control the water rights for the entire neighborhood. This would give him a significant amount of power. He could increase water rates, disrupt the HOA's control, and force Karen and Doug to back down. It was risky, but it was the only way to fight back against the people who had been poisoning his mother and trying to push them out of their home. The problem, of course, was money. Marcus didn't have the kind of savings required to purchase a company, especially one with assets as valuable as Clearwater LLC. His savings were tied up in medical bills, and the loan he had just taken out for his mother's treatment was already looming over him. But the urgency of the situation made him reckless. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. With no other options, Marcus made a series of desperate calls. He reached out to a local bank, borrowing against his house and liquidating a portion of his 401k. It wasn't ideal, but it was enough to make an offer. The process of securing the deal was grueling, endless legal paperwork, navigating the complexities of bankruptcy proceedings and facing his own doubts. But every moment of frustration only pushed him further. This was his chance to take control, and he wasn't going to back down now. Finally, after days of stress and sleepless nights, Marcus managed to secure the necessary financing, and the deal was sealed. Clearwater LLC was now his. With the company in his hands, Marcus had the power he needed. He could now raise water rates, giving him leverage over the HOA. The Thompsons would no longer be able to use the water supply as a tool to manipulate the community. Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. Raising rates was just the first step. He would push even harder to ensure Karen and Doug faced the consequences for what they had done to his family. The weight of the decision settled on him. It was a massive risk. He had borrowed against his home, drained his savings, and leveraged his future in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. But in that moment, all Marcus could think about was his mother's health and the way Karen and Doug had poisoned their lives. He had taken the only option left to him, and he was determined to see it through. Marcus had made the bold move. Now, he had the power to take down the HOA and the Thompsons once and for all. The battle was far from over, but this was the turning point he needed. The day Marcus took control of Clearwater LLC, everything began to change. With the paperwork finalized, he wasted no time in making his first move. He issued a formal announcement to the entire neighborhood. Water rates would be increasing by 400%, effective immediately. The letter went out to every homeowner, but Marcus didn't stop there. He also warned the HOA, particularly Karen and Doug Thompson, that unless they complied with his demands, he would cut off their water supply altogether. It was a bold statement, and Marcus knew it would push them to the brink. As soon as the news spread, the HOA board, led by Karen, was thrown into chaos. Karen, ever the strategist, tried to downplay Marcus' actions, but it was clear she was losing her grip on the neighborhood. The residents, who had long been under her thumb, started asking questions and becoming more outspoken. This time, Marcus had leverage, and he wasn't afraid to use it. Then came the turning point. With the evidence of Doug tampering with the water supply now in his hands, Marcus knew it was time to go to the police. He handed over the video footage of Doug pouring antifreeze into their water meter, along with the water sample that had tested positive for ethylene glycol. It didn't take long for the authorities to act. Doug and Karen were arrested, their plot exposed for everyone to see. The community had finally learned the truth, and the Thompsons' reign of terror was over. In the days that followed, Marcus was overwhelmed by the support of his neighbors. Many had feared Karen's influence and had remained silent, but now they rallied behind Marcus, grateful for his courage and determination. Some neighbors contributed money to help with Margaret's mounting medical bills, while others offered their assistance in any way they could. The sense of unity that Marcus had fought for was finally taking root. The old HOA board was swiftly dissolved. The residents voted in a new board, one that was fair, transparent, and dedicated to rebuilding trust within the community. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt like a place of hope rather than fear. As Marcus watched the transformation unfold, he couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. His mother was still recovering, but now there was light at the end of the tunnel. The battle for justice was far from over, but in this moment, Marcus knew he had won. As Marcus stood in the now thriving neighborhood, Watching his neighbors rebuild the community with a newfound sense of unity, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey. The fight for justice hadn't come from the legal system or the authorities. It had come from the collective action of individuals who were willing to stand up for what was right. When the system failed to act, it was the courage and resilience of ordinary people like Marcus that had made the difference. Marcus had fought not only for his mother's health, but also for the dignity and fairness of the entire community. His efforts exposed the corruption within the HOA and broke the stranglehold Karen and Doug had held over the neighborhood for so long. But more than just a battle for justice, it had been a fight to restore the integrity of a community that had been fractured by fear and control. The story also served as a powerful reminder of the strength that comes from family love and resilience. Despite the overwhelming odds, Marcus never gave up. His determination to protect his mother, to defend her from those who sought to abuse their power, drove every decision he made. It wasn't just about winning, it was about doing what was right. And in the end, that was the most important lesson of all.